The fluorescent lights in the hospital cafeteria buzzed with that particular frequency that made exhaustion feel even heavier. I stared at the half-eaten sandwich on my tray, my scrub still carrying the faint smell of antiseptic and the long 12-hour shift I'd just finished. Around me, the late-night crowd consisted of other nurses, a few doctors grabbing coffee between emergencies, and visitors who'd been at bedsides too long to remember when they'd last eaten a real meal. My phone sat face up on the table, the screen dark, but somehow still demanding my attention. 3 missed calls from the elementary school, 2 voicemails I hadn't had time to listen to, and a text from Mrs. Chen, the neighbor who watched Emma after school, sent 4 hours ago. "She's fine, but we need to talk when you get home. It's important." Important. Everything was always important when you were a single mother working double shifts to keep your daughter fed and a roof over both your heads. Important meant another bill I couldn't pay, another problem I couldn't solve, another crack in the foundation I was desperately trying to hold together. I was 27 years old, and some days I felt twice that. Rough shift? Marcus, one of the ER doctors, dropped into the chair across from me. He was in his 40s, kind-faced, the type who actually remembered nurses' names and didn't treat us like furniture. "They're all rough." I managed a tired smile. "But we saved Mrs. Patterson, so that's something." "The cardiac arrest in room 4? Hell yes, that's something." He raised his coffee cup in salute. "You did good work tonight, Sophia. Don't let anyone tell you different." If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you. The compliment warmed me, but it couldn't quite dispel the anxiety that had been building all evening. Mrs. Chen's text played on repeat in my mind. Important. What did that mean? Had Emma gotten in trouble at school? Was she sick? Had something happened? I checked my watch. 11:45. Mrs. Chen would be asleep by now, and Emma definitely would be. Whatever conversation needed to happen would have to wait until morning, which meant another night of worry, keeping me awake in the tiny apartment we called home. "You heading out?" Marcus asked, watching me gather my things. "Yeah. Need to get home to my daughter." "How old is she now? 6? 7. Just turned 7 last month." I slung my bag over my shoulder, my body protesting the movement. Everything ached, my feet from standing all shift, my back from lifting patients, my heart from the constant weight of responsibility that never lightened. The subway ride from Manhattan to Queens took 40 minutes at this hour. The train car mostly empty except for a few late-shift workers like myself and a couple of drunk college kids who were too loud and too young to understand that the rest of us were just trying to survive another day. I sat in the corner, my bag clutched against my chest, and let my mind wander to places I tried to keep locked away during daylight hours. Emma's father had been gone for 5 years now, walked out when she was 2 years old, said he wasn't ready for the responsibility, that he needed to find himself, or some other bullshit excuse that translated to, "I don't want to be here." The child support checks had been sporadic at first, then stopped altogether. Last I heard, he was living in California with a new girlfriend who didn't know he had a daughter back in New York. I'd tried to hate him. God knows I'd tried. But hatred took energy I couldn't spare, so I'd settled for bitter acceptance instead. He was gone. We were here. That was the reality, and reality didn't care about fair or unfair, deserved or undeserved. The apartment building looked even more depressing in the harsh glow of the streetlights, peeling paint, a front door that didn't lock properly, stairs that creaked ominously under your weight. But it was cheap, relatively speaking, and the neighborhood wasn't terrible. I'd seen worse during my nursing rotations in some of the rougher parts of the city. Mrs. Chen's apartment was on the first floor. I knocked softly, not wanting to wake Emma if she was sleeping on the couch like she sometimes did when I worked late. The door opened immediately, like Mrs. Chen had been waiting. She was 72, had immigrated from China 40 years ago and treated Emma like the granddaughter she'd never had. Her face, usually warm and welcoming, was drawn with concern. "Sophia." She stepped aside to let me in. "Come in, please. We need to talk before you take Emma home." My stomach dropped. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She's fine, sleeping in the guest room." Mrs. Chen gestured to her small living room, where 2 cups of tea sat waiting on the coffee table. She'd been expecting me. But something happened today. Something that concerns me very much. I sank onto the couch, my exhaustion momentarily forgotten in the face of new worry. "Tell me." Mrs. Chen settled across from me, her hands folded in her lap in that precise way she had, like she was organizing her thoughts before speaking. "This afternoon, when I picked Emma up from school, her teacher asked to speak with me. Miss Rodriguez said Emma has been different lately, quieter, not playing with the other children during recess, having trouble concentrating. She didn't mention any of this at our last parent-teacher conference." My mind raced through the past few weeks, searching for signs I'd missed. Had Emma been quieter? Had I been too exhausted to notice? "Miss Rodriguez said it's been gradual, the past 3 weeks, maybe a month. But today was different. Today, Emma had a meltdown during art class. She started crying and couldn't stop. And when Miss Rodriguez tried to comfort her, Emma pulled away, said she didn't want to be touched." The words landed like stones in my chest. She said that? Not just to Miss Rodriguez. To everyone. The other children tried to hug her during circle time, and she screamed. Mrs. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. "Sophia, I've been watching children for 40 years. I know when something is wrong, and something is very wrong with Emma." I pressed my hands against my face, trying to process this information through the fog of exhaustion and rising panic. Emma was sensitive, sure. She'd always been more emotional than other kids her age, more prone to tears and fears. But pulling away from touch, screaming when other children tried to hug her, that was new. That was concerning. "Did you ask her what's wrong?" I tried, very gently. Mrs. Chen leaned forward, her expression pained. She wouldn't tell me specifics, just kept saying she was fine, that nothing happened. "But Sophia, when I was giving her dinner tonight, I noticed something." She paused, and that pause made my blood run cold. "What did you notice?" "Bruises, on her upper arms, small ones, like fingerprints." Mrs. Chen met my eyes directly. "And when I asked her about them, she said she fell. But those bruises, they don't look like falling bruises. They look like someone grabbed her, hard." The world tilted. I gripped the edge of the couch, forcing myself to breathe through the sudden wave of nausea. Bruises, fingerprint bruises. Someone had grabbed my daughter hard enough to leave marks, and I hadn't noticed. I'd been so consumed with work, with bills, with surviving, that I hadn't seen what was happening right in front of me. "Did she say who? Did she tell you anything about how it happened?" "No." She shut down completely when I pressed, started crying and asked for you. Mrs. Chen's voice softened. "I think she needs to tell you herself, Sophia. But I wanted you to know before you took her home, so you could be prepared." I stood on shaking legs. "Can I see her?" "Of course, but Sophia?" Mrs. Chen caught my arm as I moved toward the guest room. "Be gentle. Whatever happened, she's frightened. She needs to know she's safe with you." Emma was curled on her side in Mrs. Chen's guest bed, her blonde hair spread across the pillow, her small chest rising and falling with deep sleep. She looked so tiny, so vulnerable, clutching the stuffed rabbit she'd had since she was a baby. 7 years old. She should be worried about homework and playground games, not whatever had put those bruises on her arms. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching her sleep, and felt something crack open in my chest. The exhaustion, the worry, the constant juggling of too many responsibilities with too few resources, All of it crystallized into one sharp point of protective fury. Someone had hurt my daughter. Someone had put their hands on her hard enough to leave marks, and I was going to find out who. Baby? I touched her shoulder gently. Emma, sweetheart, it's Mama. Time to wake up. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused for a moment. Then she saw me, and her face crumpled. Mama. I'm here, baby. I'm here. I gathered her into my arms, feeling how tightly she clung to me, how her small body shook with silent sobs. Mrs. Chen said you had a hard day. I want to go home. Her voice was muffled against my shoulder. Please, Mama. I just want to go home. Okay. We'll go home. I pulled back enough to see her face, using my thumbs to wipe away her tears. But first, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me, okay? You're not in trouble. Nothing you tell me will make me angry at you. I promise. She nodded, her lower lip trembling. Mrs. Chen said you have some bruises on your arms. Can you show them to me? Emma hesitated, then slowly pushed up the sleeves of her pajama shirt. Even in the dim light from the hallway, I could see them clearly. 4 small bruises on her left upper arm, positioned exactly like fingerprints. Someone had grabbed her. Someone with adult-sized hands had grabbed my 7-year-old daughter hard enough to leave marks that would last for days. Who did this, Emma? I kept my voice steady, calm, even though everything inside me was screaming. It's okay to tell me. You won't be in trouble. I don't want to talk about it. She pulled her sleeves back down, her movements jerky and frightened. Please, Mama. I just want to go home and go to sleep and forget about it. Baby, I can't help you if you don't tell me what happened. I cupped her face gently, forcing her to meet my eyes. Did someone at school do this? One of the other kids? She shook her head. A teacher? Another headshake, more vigorous this time. Then who? My voice cracked despite my best efforts. Emma, please. Who hurt you? Her eyes filled with fresh tears. I can't tell you. He said if I told, something bad would happen. He said I had to keep it a secret. He. The word landed like a bomb. Not another child. Not a woman. A man. A man had put his hands on my daughter and then threatened her into silence. Emma. I pulled her close again, my own tears starting to fall now. Listen to me very carefully. No grown-up should ever tell you to keep secrets from Mama. Ever. If someone told you that, they were wrong. They were lying. And nothing bad is going to happen if you tell me the truth. I promise you. I will keep you safe. She was quiet for a long moment, her face pressed against my neck. Then so quietly I almost didn't hear it. Mr. Derek? The name meant nothing to me. Who's Mr. Derek, baby? The music teacher. He comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays to teach us songs. Her voice was small, breaking. He's nice to everyone. He brings candy sometimes and tells funny jokes. But last week, he asked me to stay after class to help him put away the instruments. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. What happened when you stayed after class? He closed the door, said we needed privacy so the other kids wouldn't bother us. She was crying harder now, the words coming in gasps. And then he touched me, Mama. He put his hands on me in places he shouldn't. And when I tried to leave, he grabbed my arms and said I couldn't tell anyone. He said if I told, no one would believe me because he's a teacher and teachers don't lie. He said you would be angry at me for making up stories. The room spun. I held Emma tighter, my own body shaking with rage and horror and grief. A music teacher. A trusted adult in a position of authority. Someone who was supposed to be safe. And he'd touched my daughter. He'd violated her and then threatened her into silence. Where did he touch you? I forced the words out, needing to know the full extent of what had happened, even though every cell in my body wanted to scream and break things and find this man and destroy him. Emma whispered the answer, and my world ended and reformed in the space of those few terrible words. Okay. I pulled back, cupping her face in my hands, making sure she could see that I believed her, that I wasn't angry at her, that this wasn't her fault. Okay, baby. Thank you for telling me. You were so brave. So brave. And I believe you. I believe every word. And Mr. Derek was wrong. I'm not angry at you. I could never be angry at you. This is not your fault. None of this is your fault. Are you going to tell? Fresh panic entered her voice. He said if I told, something bad would happen. The only bad thing that's going to happen is to Mr. Derek. My voice came out harder than I intended, and I softened it immediately. I'm going to make sure he never, ever hurts you or any other child ever again. But first, we need to go home and get some sleep. And tomorrow, we're going to talk to some people who can help. Okay? She nodded, exhausted and emotionally spent. I gathered her up, thanked Mrs. Chen with promises to call tomorrow, and carried Emma up the 3 flights of stairs to our apartment. She fell asleep almost immediately once I got her into bed, her small hand clutching mine like she was afraid I'd disappear if she let go. I sat beside her in the dark, watching her sleep, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. For 7 years, I'd been fighting to survive, working double shifts, stretching every dollar, accepting help when I could find it, and going without when I couldn't. I'd told myself I was doing enough, that keeping Emma fed and housed and clothed was sufficient, that love could fill in the gaps where money and time fell short. But I hadn't protected her from this. I hadn't seen the signs. I'd been so focused on surviving that I'd missed the fact that my daughter was being violated by someone who was supposed to be safe. And now I had to figure out what to do about it. Call the police? Absolutely. But I'd heard the stories, knew how these cases often went. A 7-year-old's word against a respected teacher's. No physical evidence beyond bruises that could have come from anywhere. And even if they believed her, even if they arrested him, the legal process could take months or years. Trials, testimony. My daughter having to relive her trauma over and over while lawyers picked apart her story. I pulled out my phone, staring at the dark screen. I needed help. Real help. From someone with resources I didn't have. Someone who could do more than file a report and hope the system worked the way it was supposed to. And suddenly, impossibly, I thought of a conversation I'd overheard 3 months ago in the hospital cafeteria. 2 doctors talking in hushed tones about a patient who'd been brought in with gunshot wounds. Belongs to Dominic Russo, one had said. The Russo family. You know, the organization. They brought him straight here instead of calling an ambulance. Dominic Russo. I'd heard the name before, whispered in the same tones people used for urban legends and cautionary tales. The man who ran half of Manhattan's underground, who had politicians and police on his payroll, who could make problems disappear with a phone call. Dangerous. Ruthless. Not someone a nurse with a 7-year-old daughter should ever, under any circumstances, try to contact. But as I sat in the dark watching Emma sleep, feeling the weight of my own helplessness, I wondered if maybe dangerous was exactly what I needed. The system had rules, procedures, limitations. Men like Dominic Russo didn't. I was still debating with myself when my phone buzzed with an incoming text. Unknown number. Sophia Torres? This is Detective Chen from the 114th Precinct. Your neighbor, Mrs. Chen, called me tonight with concerns about your daughter. I'd like to speak with you tomorrow if possible. I work with a special unit that handles cases involving children. I stared at the message, then at Emma's sleeping face. The system was already moving. Maybe that was enough. Maybe I should trust in procedures and protocols, and people who devoted their careers to protecting children. But something in me, something that had been forged in 7 years of fighting alone, whispered that it wouldn't be enough. That Mr. Derek would have a good lawyer and a clean record and a sob story about false accusations. That the system would fail Emma the way it had failed so many others. I needed more than the system could offer. I needed someone who could guarantee that Mr. Derek would never hurt another child. Not next month after a trial, not next year after an appeal. Now, permanently. The thought should have horrified me. I was a nurse. I'd taken an oath to do no harm. I believed in law and order and justice through proper channels. But I also believed in protecting my daughter. And if that meant stepping outside the boundaries of what good people were supposed to do, then maybe I wasn't as good as I'd always thought. I texted back to Detective Chen. Yes, tomorrow afternoon. Thank you. Then I opened a new browser window and typed 4 words that would change everything. How to contact Dominic Russo. The Sapphire was the kind of restaurant I'd walked past 100 times without ever imagining I'd enter. Located in Manhattan's meatpacking district, it occupied a converted warehouse with floor-to-ceiling windows and a reputation that preceded it by miles. Expensive Italian cuisine, a wine list that required a sommelier to navigate, and, if the rumors were true, a private dining room on the second floor where Dominic Russo conducted business that had nothing to do with food. I'd spent 3 hours that morning talking to Detective Chen, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She'd been gentle with Emma, patient with her questions, and thorough in her documentation. She'd explained the process: medical examination, formal statement, investigation, possible arrest. She'd promised to move quickly, to do everything in her power to keep Emma safe. And then she'd said the words that confirmed my worst fears. I'll be honest with you, Ms. Torres. These cases are difficult. Without physical evidence beyond the bruises, it often comes down to credibility. A child's word against an adult's. We'll do everything we can, but I want you to be prepared for the possibility that the district attorney might not feel they have enough to prosecute. Might not have enough to prosecute? My daughter had been assaulted by a trusted adult, and the system might not do anything about it because there wasn't enough evidence, because she was 7 years old and her word didn't carry the same weight as a grown man's. That's when I knew I'd made the right decision. Getting an audience with Dominic Russo had been surprisingly easy. I'd asked one of the ER doctors, the one who'd mentioned the Russo family months ago, if he knew how to reach them. He'd looked at me like I'd grown a second head, asked if I was in some kind of trouble, then reluctantly given me a phone number. "Don't tell anyone where you got this," he'd warned. "And be careful, Sophia. These aren't the kind of people you want to owe favors to." I'd called the number. A man had answered, his voice professional and cold. I'd explained I needed to speak with Mr. Russo about a personal matter involving my daughter. Expected to be dismissed, laughed at, hung up on. Instead, the man had asked my name, told me to be at the Sapphire at 6 o'clock that evening, and disconnected. Now I stood outside the restaurant in the one decent dress I owned, my heart hammering against my ribs. Emma was with Mrs. Chen, who'd agreed to keep her for the evening with promises that I'd explain everything soon. I'd left work early, claiming a family emergency, which was the truth even if my supervisor didn't know the details. The hostess looked at me skeptically when I entered. I clearly didn't belong here, not with my thrift store dress and my practical nurse's shoes. "Can I help you?" "I have an appointment with Mr. Russo, Sophia Torres." Her expression shifted immediately from skepticism to careful neutrality. "Of course. Please follow me." She led me through the main dining room, where beautiful people ate beautiful food and laughed with the ease of those who'd never worried about money. Then up a flight of stairs I hadn't noticed from the street, down a hallway with thick carpet that absorbed sound, to a door guarded by 2 men in expensive suits who looked me over with professional assessment before stepping aside. The private dining room was smaller than I'd expected. A single table dominated the center, already set with crystal and china. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, now glowing with evening lights. And standing by those windows, hands in his pockets, was Dominic Russo. He was younger than I'd imagined. Late 30s, maybe 40, with dark hair silvered at the temples and a face that would have been handsome if not for the coldness in his dark eyes. He wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than I made in 3 months, and he moved with the kind of controlled grace that suggested violence held in check. Ms. Torres. His voice was cultured, educated, with just a hint of the Brooklyn streets underneath. Please, sit. I moved to the table on legs that felt unsteady, my nurse's training the only thing keeping me from bolting. I'd seen death, had held people's hands while they took their last breaths, had worked through crisis after crisis with steady hands and a calm voice. But sitting across from Dominic Russo, I felt like a child playing at adult games I didn't understand. Thank you for seeing me. I forced my voice to remain steady. I know you're busy, and I wouldn't have asked if it wasn't important. My associate said it concerned your daughter. He settled into the chair across from me, his movements precise. I have a particular interest in matters involving children. What happened? The directness surprised me. No small talk, no assessment of whether I was worth his time. Just straight to the point. I took a breath and told him everything. About Emma, about Mr. Derrick, about the bruises and the touching and the threats to keep silent. About Detective Chen and the possibility that nothing would be done because the evidence wasn't strong enough. Dominic listened without interruption, his expression never changing. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. This music teacher, he said finally. Derek Lancaster. He's been at PS 142 for 6 years. Previously taught at a private school in Connecticut before an incident that was quietly settled out of court. No charges filed, just a financial settlement and a confidentiality agreement. I stared at him. How do you know all that? I make it my business to know things. His eyes, when they met mine, held something dark and cold. The moment my associate told me what you needed to discuss, I had people start looking into it. Derek. Lancaster is a predator. Your daughter isn't his first victim. She likely won't be his last unless someone stops him. The detective said she'd investigate. Even as I said it, I knew how weak it sounded. The detective will investigate. She'll talk to other parents, other children. Maybe she'll find enough evidence to arrest him. Maybe the DA will decide to prosecute. Maybe he'll be convicted and serve some fraction of the sentence he deserves. Dominic leaned forward slightly. Or maybe he'll walk free because the system isn't designed to protect children from men like him. The system is designed to protect men like him from consequences. So what do I do? The question came out desperate. How do I protect Emma? How do I make sure he never hurts another child? You're already doing it. He gestured between us. You came here. You stepped outside the boundaries of what good people are supposed to do because you understand that sometimes the system isn't enough. Sometimes justice requires methods that aren't legal or ethical or clean. Are you saying you'll help me? I'm saying I'll handle it. His voice was quiet but absolute. Derek Lancaster will never teach again. He'll never touch another child. He'll never be a threat to anyone. This I promise you. What will you do to him? I needed to know, needed to understand what I was agreeing to. Nothing you need to worry about. Dominic's expression remained neutral. You're a nurse, Ms. Torres. You save lives. You heal people. What I do lives in a different world, and you don't need that blood on your hands. All you need to know is that your daughter is safe. Can you accept that? I thought about Emma, about the bruises on her arms, and the fear in her eyes, and the way she'd pulled away from touch that should have been comforting. I thought about Mr. Derrick, about the other children he'd hurt and the ones he would hurt in the future if someone didn't stop him. I thought about justice and vengeance and the space between them. Yes, I said finally. I can accept that. Dominic nodded once, as if I'd passed some test I hadn't known I was taking. Good. But understand that this comes with conditions. I don't do favors without expecting something in return. And there it was, the catch I'd been waiting for. What do you want from me? Information. He leaned back in his chair, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. You work at Metropolitan Hospital. You see things, hear things. I have business interests that occasionally intersect with healthcare. I need someone on the inside who can provide information when I ask for it. Nothing that would compromise patient care. Nothing illegal. Just awareness. You want me to spy for you. The words tasted bitter. I want you to be my eyes and ears in a place I can't easily access, he corrected. In exchange, Derek Lancaster disappears from Emma's life permanently. You also have my protection. If anyone threatens you or your daughter, you call me. If you have problems that need solving, you call me. Consider yourself and Emma under my umbrella. That's not nothing, Ms. Torres. He was right. Protection from Dominic Russo wasn't nothing. It was probably worth more than anything I could offer in return, but it also meant binding myself to him, to his world, to obligations I couldn't fully predict. How long? I asked. How long would I owe you this information? Until I say otherwise. His bluntness was almost refreshing after a lifetime of people dancing around the truth. I don't make temporary arrangements, but I also don't abuse the people who work for me. You'll find I'm more generous than the hospital administration that underpays you and the system that failed your daughter. A waiter appeared with 2 plates of food I hadn't ordered. Pasta that smelled incredible, paired with wine I couldn't identify. Dominic gestured for me to eat, and I realized I was starving. I'd been too nervous to eat all day. We ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was extraordinary, each bite a reminder of how different his world was from mine. When I finally looked up, he was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. You're wondering if you're making a deal with the devil, he said quietly. Am I? Probably. A hint of something that might have been humor touched his expression. But sometimes the devil is more honest than the angels. I'm telling you exactly what I am and what I want. The system promises you justice and fairness and protection, then fails to deliver. At least with me, you know what you're getting. He wasn't wrong. And sitting there, eating food I couldn't afford in a restaurant I'd never belong in, making a deal with a man whose reputation was built on violence and control, I felt something strange. Not fear, though that was certainly present. Not regret, though that would probably come later. Relief. I felt relief that someone was finally taking this seriously, that someone with power and resources was going to do what the system couldn't or wouldn't, that my daughter would be safe. Okay, I said, setting down my fork. I'll do it. I'll be your eyes and ears at the hospital, and you'll make sure Mr. Derek never hurts another child. We have an agreement. Dominic raised his wineglass in salute. Welcome to my world, Sophia Torres. I have a feeling you're going to be very valuable. I lifted my own glass with a trembling hand and drank to a bargain I couldn't fully comprehend. Somewhere in Queens, Emma was sleeping safe in Mrs. Chen's guest room. Tomorrow I'd explain to her that Mr. Derek wouldn't be a problem anymore. She'd ask questions I couldn't answer truthfully. But she'd be safe. That's what mattered. Everything else, I'd figure out as I went. As I left the Sapphire an hour later, Dominic's final words echoed in my mind. I'll be in touch within 48 hours. Derek Lancaster will no longer be a concern. And Sophia, don't look too closely at how I handle it. Some things are better left unknown. I walked to the subway in the warm evening air, feeling like I'd crossed a threshold I could never return through. My life had just divided into before and after. Before, I was a nurse who worked hard and played by the rules. After, I was something else. Something I didn't have a name for yet. But Emma would be safe. And in the end, that's all that really mattered. 48 hours turned into 36. I was in the middle of my shift, checking vitals on a post-op patient in room 412, when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It's done. Lancaster is no longer a concern. Check the news. DR. My hands trembled as I pulled up a local news site. The headline appeared immediately. Elementary school music teacher found dead in apparent suicide. PS 142 community in shock. Derek Lancaster, age 34, found in his apartment early this morning. No signs of foul play. A note was discovered, though police weren't releasing its contents. The article quoted the school principal expressing shock and grief. Parents interviewed about how wonderful Mr. Derrick had been with the children, how no one could have seen this coming. I stood in that hospital room, my patient's vital signs forgotten, and felt the world tilt. Dominic had done exactly what he'd promised. Derek Lancaster was gone, permanently. No trial, no testimony, no years of Emma having to relive her trauma. Just gone. Nurse Torres? My patient's voice pulled me back. Are you all right? You look pale. I'm fine. I forced a smile and finished recording her vitals. Just remembered something I forgot to do earlier. I'll be right back. I made it to the supply closet before my legs gave out. I sank onto a box of linens, my phone clutched in my shaking hands, and tried to process what I'd just done. A man was dead. Dominic had made it look like suicide, had probably left a confession in that note the police weren't releasing, and I had asked him to do it. Maybe not explicitly, maybe not with those exact words, but I'd known what would happen when I walked into the Sapphire. The door opened, and Marcus stuck his head in. Hey, someone said you looked sick. You okay? Just needed a minute. I stood up, forcing my nurse's mask back into place. I'm fine. You sure? Because you've been off all day. If you need to go home... I'm fine, Marcus. Really. I pushed past him, heading back to my rounds, burying the guilt and horror under layers of professional competence. I had 6 more hours of my shift. I could fall apart later. But falling apart wasn't an option when I got home at midnight and found Emma still awake, sitting at the kitchen table with Mrs. Chen. My daughter's eyes were red from crying, and there was a crumpled tissue in her small hand. Mama! She ran to me, and I caught her, holding her tight. Did you hear? Mr. Derrick died. Miss Rodriguez told us today at school. She said he was sick and that's why he died, but Jenny's mom said he killed himself. I looked at Mrs. Chen over Emma's head. The older woman's expression was carefully neutral, but her eyes held knowledge that made my stomach clench. She knew. Somehow, she knew what I'd done. I heard, baby. I kissed Emma's hair, feeling her small body shake with sobs that seemed too big for her frame. I'm so sorry you had to find out at school. I'm not sad. The words came out fierce, muffled against my shoulder. I know I'm supposed to be sad when someone dies, but I'm not. I'm glad he's gone, Mama. Does that make me bad? No, sweetheart. That doesn't make you bad. I pulled back to look at her face, wiping away her tears. It makes you honest. Mr. Derrick hurt you. You don't have to be sad that he can't hurt you anymore. But Miss Rodriguez was crying, and some of the other kids were crying because they liked Mr. Derrick, and I couldn't cry because I was just relieved. She stumbled over the big word, one she must have picked up from Dr. Martinez, the child psychologist Detective Chen had recommended we see. Am I a bad person for feeling relieved? You're the best person I know. I held her face between my hands, making sure she could see the truth in my eyes. And feeling relieved is completely normal. Mr. Derrick can't hurt you or anyone else now. That's not something to feel guilty about. After I got Emma to bed, a process that took an hour of reading and talking and reassuring, I returned to the kitchen where Mrs. Chen was washing the dinner dishes I'd missed. You don't have to do that, I said quietly. I know. She didn't look at me, her attention focused on the plates. Sophia, I've lived in this city for 40 years. I know how things work. I know what happens when the system fails and people take matters into their own hands. My blood ran cold. Mrs. Chen, I'm not judging you. She set down the dish and finally turned to face me. I'm a mother too. I'm a grandmother. If someone had hurt my daughter the way that man hurt Emma, I would have done whatever was necessary to protect her. The question is, What did it cost you? I sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. I don't know yet. But you know there will be a cost. She sat across from me, her weathered hands folded on the table. Men who solve problems like this don't do it out of kindness. What does he want from you? I told her. About Dominic Rousseau, about the sapphire, about the agreement I'd made. Mrs. Chen listened without interruption, her expression growing more troubled with each detail. This is dangerous, she said finally. Not just for you, for Emma too. You've tied your family to a man whose world is built on violence. What happens when he asks you for information that could hurt someone? What happens when being his eyes and ears isn't enough anymore? I'll handle it when it happens. But even as I said it, I knew how naive that sounded. Emma is safe. That's what matters. Emma is safe from Derek Lancaster, but you've made her vulnerable to other threats you can't predict. Mrs. Chen reached across the table and took my hand. I'm not telling you this to make you feel worse. I'm telling you because you need to be prepared. Men like Dominic Rousseau don't make simple deals. They make investments, and eventually, they expect returns. She was right, and I knew it. But sitting there in my tiny kitchen at 1 in the morning, exhausted and grieving and relieved in equal measure, I couldn't bring myself to regret what I'd done. Emma was safe. The nightmares would eventually fade. She could go to school without fear. That had to be worth something. My phone buzzed again, another text from the unknown number. I'm sending a car for you tomorrow at 6 p.m. We need to discuss next steps. Bring Emma. It's time she understood what protection means. I stared at the message, my heart sinking. Dominic wanted to meet Emma, wanted her to see him, to understand that our safety came with a price. He was staking his claim, making it clear that we belonged to his world now whether I liked it or not. What is it? Mrs. Chen asked, reading my expression. He wants to meet Emma. Of course he does. She squeezed my hand once, then released it. You've entered his world, Sophia. Now he's entering yours. The question is, how much are you willing to let him in? I didn't have an answer. Not then, and not the next evening when a black town car pulled up outside our building with a driver who knew my name and Emma's. The man was polite, professional, and utterly terrifying in his calm competence. Mr. Russo is expecting you at the Sapphire, he said as he opened the door for us. There's a child seat in the back for your daughter. Emma climbed in with wide eyes, taking in the leather seats and the bottle of sparkling water waiting in the cup holder. Mama, this is fancy. Where are we going? To meet a friend. The lie came easily, smoothly. Someone who's been helping us. Helping us with what? Just helping. I buckled her in, then settled beside her, my stomach churning with anxiety. He's a very important man, Emma. I need you to be polite and use your best manners. Like when we visit Grandma? Emma asked, referencing my mother who we saw once a year at most, the relationship strained by choices I'd made that she'd never forgiven. Exactly like that. The drive to the Sapphire took 30 minutes through evening traffic. Emma pressed her face against the window, watching the city transform from our neighborhood's modest buildings to Manhattan's gleaming towers. She asked questions I half answered, my mind focused on what was waiting for us. This time, we entered through the main entrance. The hostess greeted us with a warm smile that seemed genuine until I saw how her eyes flicked nervously toward Emma. Mr. Russo is waiting upstairs. Please follow me. We climbed the same stairs I'd taken 3 nights ago, but this time Emma's small hand was in mine, her steps uncertain on the thick carpet. The guards at the door nodded to us, and one of them smiled at Emma with surprising gentleness. Pretty dress, he said. Emma was wearing her favorite purple sundress, the one with flowers embroidered on the collar. My daughter has one just like it. The comment seemed to ease Emma's nervousness. She smiled back, a small thing, but genuine. The private dining room had been transformed. The formal table was gone, replaced by a smaller, more casual setup. And there was a second chair, child-sized, positioned next to where I'd sat before. But what caught Emma's attention immediately was the art supplies spread across a side table: professional-grade colored pencils, sketch pads, watercolor sets. "Wow," she breathed. "Mama, look." Dominic stood by the windows as before, but this time he turned immediately when we entered. His expression softened when he saw Emma, something genuine and almost vulnerable crossing his features before he locked it away. "You must be Emma." He moved toward us, then stopped, crouching down to her level, rather than towering over her. "I'm Dominic. Your mother and I have been talking about how to keep you safe." Emma looked at me, uncertain, then back at him. "You're the one who helped?" "I am." He gestured toward the art supplies. "Your mother mentioned you like to draw. I thought maybe while we talk, you could show me what you're working on." If you're hooked on this story, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. "Can I, Mama?" Emma's eyes were already drawn to the supplies, the promise of professional materials too tempting to resist. "Of course, baby." While Emma settled at the side table, immediately absorbed in the sketchpad, Dominic gestured for me to sit at the main table. He poured water for both of us, his movements precise and controlled. "She seems resilient," he observed quietly, his eyes on Emma. "That's good. Children who survive trauma need resilience." "She has nightmares." I kept my voice low. "Wakes up crying sometimes, but Dr. Martinez says that's normal, that it'll take time." "It will." Something in his tone suggested personal experience. "But she'll get through it, especially now that the source of her fear is gone." "Thank you for that." The words felt inadequate. "I know I said it before, but don't thank me for doing what should have been done." He leaned back in his chair. "The system failed her. I simply corrected that failure." "Mr. Russo." "Dominic." He corrected gently. "We're past formalities, Sophia. You've brought your daughter into my world. That makes us something more than business associates." "What does it make us?" "Family, of a sort." He took a sip of water, his eyes never leaving mine. "I protect my family. I provide for them, and in return, they're loyal to me. That's how this works." The word family sent a chill down my spine. I'd agreed to provide information, to be his eyes and ears at the hospital. I hadn't agreed to become part of his organization, to bind Emma and myself to him in ways that felt permanent. "I need to be clear about something," I said carefully. "I'll give you the information we agreed on. I'll honor our deal, but Emma isn't part of this. She doesn't need to know who you are or what you do. She's 7 years old. She deserves to be a kid. She deserves to be safe." Dominic's voice remained calm. "And part of being safe is understanding who protects her and why. I'm not going to corrupt your daughter, Sophia, but I am going to make sure she knows that if anyone ever threatens her again, she has someone to call besides an overwhelmed police force and an underfunded child services department." "You want her to see you as a protector." "I want her to see reality." He leaned forward slightly. "The world isn't safe, especially not for vulnerable children with single mothers who work double shifts just to keep food on the table. You can pretend otherwise, keep her sheltered and naive, and watch her get hurt when reality crashes through those illusions. Or you can teach her that she has real protection, real power, that when she calls for help, someone actually comes." He wasn't wrong. I'd spent Emma's entire life trying to protect her through sheer force of will and exhaustion, and it hadn't been enough. Derek Lancaster had gotten to her anyway, had put his hands on her in ways that would scar her for years. All my working, all my sacrifice, all my desperate attempts to do everything myself, none of it had kept her safe. "What do you want from her?" I asked quietly. "Long term, I mean. What's your plan here?" "I want her to grow up knowing she's protected. That's all." Dominic's expression was sincere. I'm not going to recruit a 7-year-old into my organization if that's what you're worried about. But I am going to make sure she understands that you and I have an arrangement that benefits everyone, that the safety she feels now is real and will continue as long as we honor our agreement. And when she's older, when she asks questions about what you do, then you tell her the truth, that I'm a man who operates outside the law when the law fails people, that I do things that aren't always good but are sometimes necessary, that the world is complicated and protection doesn't always come from people wearing badges. He paused. But that's years away, Sophia. For now, she's a child who was hurt and is now safe. Let her be that. Let her heal. Across the room, Emma had started singing softly to herself while she drew, some song from school that I half recognized. The sound of her voice, sweet and untroubled for the first time in weeks, made my throat tight. Okay, I said finally. She can know you're helping us. She can think of you as, I don't know, a family friend or something, but nothing more than that, not yet. Fair enough. Dominic stood, moving toward Emma. May I see what you're working on? She looked up, suddenly shy now that his attention was focused on her. It's not very good yet. I'm still practicing. I'm sure it's wonderful. He crouched beside her chair, studying the sketch pad where she'd drawn a detailed picture of a butterfly. This is excellent work, Emma. You have real talent. Mama says I get it from my grandma. She used to paint before. Emma trailed off, her expression darkening. Before what? Dominic's tone was gentle, patient. Before she decided she didn't like us anymore. Emma's small shoulders hunched. Because Mama had me without being married, and Grandma said that was wrong. So now we don't visit her, and she doesn't send birthday cards anymore. I closed my eyes, pain lancing through me. Emma had never articulated it quite that clearly before. I'd tried to shield her from my mother's rejection, had made excuses about distance and busy schedules, but children understood more than we gave them credit for. That sounds like your grandmother's loss, Dominic said seriously, because you seem like a pretty special kid to me. Emma looked at him with those two old eyes that broke my heart. Do you really think so? Or are you just saying that because you're Mama's friend? I really think so. He picked up one of the professional colored pencils, examining it. You know what? These are yours now. All of them. I want you to keep practicing, keep drawing. Maybe someday you'll make something beautiful enough to hang in my restaurant. Really? Hope blossomed across her face. You mean it? I don't say things I don't mean. He stood ruffling her hair gently. Now, why don't you keep working on that butterfly while I talk to your mother for a few more minutes? Then we'll have dinner. I had my chef prepare something special. Emma nodded, already absorbed in her work again, the colored pencils laid out before her like treasure. Dominic returned to the table, settling across from me with an expression I couldn't quite read. She's hurting, he observed. Not just from Lancaster. From everything. The absent father, the judgmental grandmother, the mother who works so hard she's barely present. She's 7 years old and already carrying too much weight. I know that. Defensiveness crept into my voice. I'm doing the best I can. I know you are. That's why I'm going to help. He pulled out a folder. Of course he had a folder. And slid it across the table. Inside, you'll find information on a private school in Manhattan. Small class sizes, excellent arts program, full scholarship in Emma's name. There's also information on a new apartment. 3 bedrooms, security building, neighborhood with good parks. First month's rent is paid. I stared at him, my heart hammering. I can't accept this. You can, and you will. His tone left no room for argument. Consider it part of our arrangement. You provide me with information. I provide you with resources to give Emma the childhood she deserves. It's a fair trade. This is more than a fair trade. This is... I couldn't even find words for what this was. Life-changing, overwhelming, terrifying in its generosity. "This is me investing in my assets," he said it bluntly. "You're more valuable to me if you're not exhausted and desperate. Emma is more secure if she's in a good school and a safe neighborhood. I'm not doing this out of altruism, Sophia. I'm doing it because it serves my interests." But when he looked at Emma, something in his expression suggested it wasn't entirely calculated. There was genuine warmth there, real concern. Maybe even something that looked like the grief of someone who'd lost something precious and saw an opportunity to protect what he couldn't before. "Who did you lose?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "You said children who survive trauma need resilience like you have personal experience. Who was it?" His expression closed off immediately, walls slamming into place. "That's not relevant to our arrangement." "It is if you're asking me to trust you with my daughter." We stared at each other across the table, tension humming between us. Finally, Dominic sighed, something weary and old crossing his features. "I had a younger sister, Sophia. She would have been Emma's age when—" He stopped, his jaw tightening. "When something happened that I couldn't prevent. I was 19, stupid, thought I could protect everyone through sheer force of will. I was wrong." "What happened to her?" "She got caught in crossfire. Not literal crossfire, but close enough. Someone wanted to hurt my father, knew the best way to do it was through his children." His voice had gone flat, emotionless in the way of people recounting old trauma. Sophia was 7 years old. She survived physically, spent years in therapy. But she was never the same. The fear never really left her. "Where is she now?" "California. Married, 2 kids, normal suburban life. She cut ties with the family 15 years ago, said she needed distance from everything that reminded her of what happened." A muscle worked in his jaw. "I don't blame her, but I also swore that if I ever had the power to prevent another child from carrying that kind of fear, I would use it." Understanding crashed over me. This wasn't just about information or assets or business arrangements. This was about his sister, about a 7-year-old girl who'd been traumatized while her older brother watched helplessly. Emma had become a proxy, a chance for Dominic to do for her what he couldn't do for Sophia. "Dominic," I said softly, "I appreciate what you did for Emma. I appreciate what you're offering now. But you need to understand something. Emma isn't your sister. Helping her won't change what happened to Sophia." "I know that." His eyes, when they met mine, held pain he usually kept buried. "But it might mean one less child grows up with nightmares she can't escape. That's worth something, isn't it?" It was worth everything. That's what terrified me. Because men who wanted to save you always ended up owning you, whether they meant to or not. And I was already starting to feel the weight of obligations settling around my shoulders, like chains made of gratitude and debt. The door opened, and servers entered with food that smelled incredible. They set plates before us, poured wine for the adults and juice for Emma, then disappeared as silently as they'd come. "Mama, look!" Emma had abandoned her drawing to come see the food. "Is that real lobster?" "It is," Dominic confirmed. "Do you like seafood?" "I don't know. I've never had it." She looked at me uncertainly. "Can I try it?" "Of course, baby." We ate together, the 3 of us, in that private room high above Manhattan. Emma tried lobster for the first time and declared it weird but good. She asked Dominic questions about the restaurant, about the art on the walls, about whether he had kids of his own. He answered patiently, with genuine warmth that didn't feel calculated or false. And I watched them interact and felt something shift in my chest. This was dangerous. Not just the arrangement we'd made, but this. The way Emma was already starting to relax around him, to see him as safe. The way he looked at her with something protective and almost tender. The way I was starting to think of him as more than just a necessary evil. We were becoming entangled in ways I hadn't anticipated, and I had no idea how to stop it or even if I wanted to. After dinner, Dominic's driver took us home. Emma fell asleep in the car, clutching the bag of art supplies, a small smile on her face. I carried her upstairs, got her into pajamas, tucked her into bed. She mumbled something about the butterfly she was going to finish drawing, then drifted off completely. My phone buzzed as I was brushing my teeth. A text from Dominic. The school information is time sensitive. They need confirmation by Friday if Emma is attending for the fall semester. The apartment is available immediately. Think about it. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. 27 years old, dark circles under my eyes from too many double shifts, wearing pajamas that had holes I hadn't bothered to mend. Behind me, I could see into Emma's room, where she slept peacefully for the first time in weeks. A better school, a safer neighborhood, security that didn't depend on broken door locks and prayers. All I had to do was say yes. All I had to do was let Dominic Russo deeper into our lives, accept his help, his resources, his protection. All I had to do was surrender the independence I'd fought so hard to maintain. But what was independence worth if it meant Emma sleeping in a bedroom with peeling paint while predators hunted her in places I'd thought were safe? What was my pride worth measured against her safety, her future, her chance at a normal childhood? I picked up my phone and typed, "Friday, I'll have an answer by Friday." His response came immediately. "Take your time, but Sophia, Emma deserves this. Don't let your pride stand in the way of giving her a better life." He was right. God help me. He was right. I turned off my phone and went to bed, but sleep didn't come easily. I lay in the dark and thought about deals with devils, about protection that came with prices, about the moment you cross a line and realize there's no going back. Derek Lancaster was dead. Emma was safe. And I had just had dinner with a crime boss who wanted to put my daughter in private school and move us into a better apartment. My life had become unrecognizable in less than a week. The question was, would I recognize myself by the time this was all over? 3 days later, on Friday morning, I called the number Dominic had provided and confirmed Emma's enrollment in the private school. That afternoon, I signed a lease on the new apartment. By the following Wednesday, we were moved in, our modest possessions looking almost comically small in the spacious three-bedroom place with hardwood floors and windows that actually opened. Emma loved her new room immediately. It had a window seat where she could draw, and Dominic had arranged for the walls to be painted the exact shade of lavender she'd requested. The art supplies he'd given her found a home in a small desk by the window, and she spent hours there, happily sketching while I unpacked boxes and tried not to think too hard about what I'd agreed to. The first request came 2 weeks later. A text from Dominic. Need to know if a patient named Marcus Vittorio has been admitted to Metropolitan in the last 48 hours. Gunshot wound, likely using false ID. I stared at the message, my stomach churning. This was it. The price for Emma's safety, for our new apartment, for the private school that started in 3 weeks. Information about a patient, probably someone involved in Dominic's world, probably someone dangerous. I could refuse. I could tell him this crossed a line, that I wouldn't compromise patient confidentiality. And then what? Would he take away the apartment? Pull Emma's scholarship? Would his protection evaporate, leaving us vulnerable again? Or would something worse happen? Would I become a problem that needed to be solved? My hands trembled as I accessed the hospital's patient database from my work computer during a break. Marcus Vittorio. Admitted Wednesday night. Gunshot wound to the shoulder, using the name David Martino. Room 634. I texted back the information, then immediately felt sick. I'd just violated patient confidentiality. I'd used my access to the hospital database for personal reasons. Well, for Dominic's reasons, which amounted to the same thing. I'd crossed a line I'd thought was uncrossable. The response came quickly. "Thank you. This helps. Your next rent payment is covered." I stared at the message. He was paying my rent now, making it explicit that my compliance had financial value. making it clear that this was a transaction, not a favor between friends. But as I returned to my shift, checking on patients and administering medications, I couldn't muster the outrage I should have felt. Because Emma was safe. She was in a good school. We had a safe place to live. And all it cost was information about a man who'd probably gotten shot while doing something illegal anyway. The rationalization felt thin even to me, but I held on to it anyway, because the alternative, admitting I'd become someone I didn't recognize, was too painful to examine. Over the following months, the requests came regularly, never more than once or twice a week, always about patients who were clearly connected to criminal enterprises. Men with gunshot wounds using fake names. Women with injuries that suggested domestic violence but who refused to press charges. Occasionally, questions about specific doctors, who was on call, what their schedules looked like, whether they could be trusted to be discreet. I answered every request. And in return, my life improved in ways I'd never imagined possible. The rent was always paid on time. Emma's school tuition was handled. When she needed a winter coat, Dominic sent her 3 to choose from. When I mentioned wanting to take a nursing certification course that would qualify me for better positions, the course fees appeared in my bank account the next day with a note. Invest in yourself. You're worth it. Emma thrived in her new school. She made friends, joined the art club, started bringing home paintings and sketches that showed real talent. The nightmares faded gradually, replaced by normal 7-year-old concerns about homework and whether her crush, a boy named Tyler, liked her back. And Dominic. Dominic became a fixture in our lives in ways I hadn't anticipated. He showed up for Emma's school art show, standing in the back of the gallery with his security detail, his face softening with genuine pride when he saw her watercolor butterfly displayed prominently. He sent her books when she mentioned liking a particular author. He remembered her birthday with a gift so thoughtful, a professional art set with her name engraved on the case, that she cried with joy. With me, he was patient and surprisingly easy to talk to. We fell into a pattern of monthly dinners at the Sapphire, Emma happily drawing in the corner while Dominic and I talked about everything and nothing. He asked about my work, my goals, my life before Emma. I found myself confiding things I'd never told anyone, about my difficult relationship with my mother, about the loneliness of single parenthood, about dreams I'd buried under the weight of survival. And he listened, really listened, with an attention that made me feel seen in ways I'd forgotten were possible. "You should go back to school," he said one evening, 3 months after we'd moved into the new apartment. "Get your nurse practitioner certification. You're too smart to be stuck doing vitals and medication rounds for the rest of your career." "That's a 2-year program," I protested. "I can't afford to cut back on work hours." "I'll cover the difference in your income. Consider it an investment in a valuable asset." He said it casually, like he wasn't offering to fundamentally change my life trajectory. "You're worth more than you're currently being paid, Sophia. Let me help you reach your potential." "Why?" The question burst out before I could stop it. "Why do you care so much? We had a deal. I give you information, you protect us. But this," I gestured between us, "this is more than that. You're investing in Emma's education, in my career, in our future. Why?" He was quiet for a long moment, his wineglass turning slowly in his hands. Emma was absorbed in her drawing, oblivious to the tension that had suddenly filled the space between us. "Because I can," he said finally. "Because I have resources that do me no good sitting in bank accounts. Because helping you helps Emma, and helping Emma means one less child grows up with the kind of scars my sister carries." "Is that all it is?" "No." He met my eyes directly. "It's also because I enjoy your company. Because you're intelligent and strong, and you make me feel like I'm more than just the organization I run. Because Emma looks at me like I'm someone worth knowing, not just someone to be feared." The admission hung between us, heavy with implications. He was lonely, I realized. This powerful, dangerous man who could make problems disappear with a phone call was fundamentally alone. And somehow, Emma and I had become the people who made him feel less isolated. Dominic, I said carefully, we can't be your family. We're grateful for everything you've done, but we can't be a substitute for what you lost. I know that. But something in his expression suggested he wanted it anyway. Wanted the illusion that he could build something good out of violence and power, that he could protect and provide and somehow atone for his inability to save his sister. It should have frightened me, this growing entanglement. Instead, it felt inevitable. Like we'd been moving toward this from the moment I'd walked into the Sapphire and asked him to solve a problem the system couldn't handle. That night, after I'd tucked Emma into bed and was cleaning up the dinner dishes, my phone rang. Not a text this time, but an actual call. Dominic's name on the screen. Is everything okay? I answered immediately, worry flaring. Late-night calls usually meant problems. I need a favor. His voice was tense in a way I'd never heard before. Not information, something more direct. What kind of favor? I have an associate who was shot tonight, not critically, but he needs medical attention and can't go to a hospital. Can you come to an address I'm sending you? Bring whatever supplies you can get your hands on. My heart hammered against my ribs. Dominic, I'm a nurse, not a trauma surgeon. If he's seriously wounded, he'll survive. He just needs the bullet removed and the wound cleaned. Please, Sophia, I wouldn't ask if I had another option. The address came through before I could respond. A warehouse in Red Hook, the kind of location that appeared in news reports about crime scenes and drug busts. I should have said no. Should have told him this crossed every line, violated every oath I'd taken as a nurse. But the desperation in his voice, the knowledge that refusing might damage the relationship that kept Emma safe, I couldn't bring myself to deny him. Give me 30 minutes. I called Mrs. Chen, who agreed to come stay with Emma despite the late hour and the obvious questions she didn't ask. Then I raided the hospital's supply closet during a bathroom break, stuffing my bag with gauze, antiseptic, local anesthetic, sutures. Stealing, technically. Another line crossed. The warehouse looked exactly as ominous as I'd imagined. Dominic met me at the door, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, blood on his shirt sleeves. Thank you for coming. He ushered me inside, where several men stood guard around another man lying on a makeshift table. This is Anthony. He took a bullet to the shoulder during a disagreement. Anthony was conscious, his face pale with pain and blood loss. The wound was in his upper right shoulder, and I could see where the bullet had entered, but not exited. Not life-threatening if treated properly, but definitely serious. I spent the next 2 hours working by the light of industrial lamps, digging out the bullet with forceps while Dominic and his men watched in tense silence. It was the most illegal thing I'd ever done, practicing medicine outside a hospital setting on a patient who clearly couldn't report how he'd been injured. But it was also exactly what I'd been trained for, and despite my fear, my hands remained steady. You're good at this, Anthony muttered through gritted teeth as I stitched his wound closed. Ever think about going into trauma? Not until tonight, I admitted. When it was finished, I cleaned up and gave detailed instructions on wound care and signs of infection to watch for. Dominic walked me to my car, his hand resting briefly on my shoulder. I owe you, he said quietly, more than I can repay tonight. You don't owe me anything. This was... I trailed off, not sure how to finish that sentence. This was scary and illegal, and I'm still not entirely sure why I did it. You did it because underneath all your protests about independence and boundaries, you understand that we're connected now, that my problems are your problems, and your problems are mine. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne mixed with gunpowder and blood. You can fight that if you want, but I think we both know it's the truth. He was right. Somewhere between agreeing to provide information and performing surgery in a warehouse, I'd stopped being a reluctant asset and become something else. An accomplice, a partner, part of his world in ways I couldn't easily extract myself from. I need to go, I said, suddenly desperate to be home with Emma, to remind myself who I was doing this for. Mrs. Chen is waiting. Of course. He stepped back, giving me space. Thank you, Sophia. Really. I drove home through empty streets, my hands still shaking slightly from adrenaline. In my bag, the stolen medical supplies felt like evidence of every choice I'd made since Emma had whispered those terrible words about Mr. Derrick. Each decision had seemed necessary at the time, justifiable, but added together, they painted a picture of someone I barely recognized. When I got home, Mrs. Chen took one look at my face and simply hugged me without asking questions. After she left, I checked on Emma, who slept peacefully in her lavender room, surrounded by art supplies and security I'd bought with compromises I couldn't take back. I was in too deep to turn back now. The question was, how much deeper would I have to go before I lost myself entirely? 6 months after I'd first walked into the Sapphire, life had settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal if you didn't look too closely at the foundation it was built on. Emma thrived in second grade, her artwork decorating not just our apartment, but also a prominent wall in Dominic's restaurant. I'd enrolled in the nurse practitioner program at NYU, my tuition mysteriously covered by an anonymous scholarship that I knew wasn't anonymous at all. And Dominic had become as much a part of our routine as grocery shopping and bedtime stories. He came for dinner every Sunday, bringing ingredients from his restaurant and cooking meals that filled our apartment with warmth and the scent of garlic and fresh herbs. Emma would help him, standing on a stool at the counter while he taught her how to properly dice an onion or fold pasta dough. Watching them together, his large hands guiding her small ones, her delighted laughter at his terrible jokes, created an ache in my chest that I tried hard to ignore. Because this wasn't real. This was an arrangement, a business relationship that had evolved into something that looked like friendship, but was really just mutual dependence dressed up in domesticity. Except it didn't feel like an arrangement when Dominic showed up at the hospital after a particularly brutal shift to drive me home because he'd heard there was a subway delay. It didn't feel like business when he spent 2 hours helping Emma with her science fair project about the water cycle, his patience infinite as she asked the same questions over and over. It didn't feel like dependence when we sat on my couch after Emma was asleep, drinking wine and talking about everything from philosophy to favorite childhood memories. It felt like something else, something dangerous and complicated and increasingly impossible to deny. Mama? Emma's voice pulled me from my thoughts. We were at the dining table, her working on homework while I studied for an upcoming exam. Can I ask you something? Of course, baby. What is it? She chewed her bottom lip, the way she did when she was nervous about something. Is Dominic your boyfriend? I nearly choked on my coffee. What? No. Why would you ask that? Because Amy at school said that when a man comes over for dinner every week and brings your mom flowers and makes her smile, that means he's her boyfriend. Emma's expression was serious, analytical. And you do smile more when he's here, like a lot more. Dominic is a friend, I said carefully, aware that this conversation was more important than it seemed on the surface. He's someone who helps us, and yes, I enjoy his company. But we're not together like that. But you like him. Not a question, an observation. I can tell. God, when had my daughter become so perceptive? It's complicated, Emma. That's what grown-ups always say when they don't want to explain something. She returned to her homework, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. I think you should be his girlfriend. He's nice. He makes good food. And he doesn't look at you the way Mr. Derrick used to look at the other teachers. The mention of Derrick Lancaster, even in passing, made my stomach clench. How did Mr. Derrick look at the other teachers? Like they were candy he wanted to eat. Emma said it so matter-of-factly, so casually, that it took a moment for the horror to register. But Dominic looks at you like you're special. Like you matter. That's better, I think. Before I could formulate a response, my phone buzzed. A text from Dominic. Need you to come to the Sapphire. Tonight if possible. It's important. The message sent a chill down my spine. He never summoned me like this, never demanded my presence without explanation. Something was wrong. I called Mrs. Chen, who agreed to come over despite the short notice. Then I texted back, "Give me an hour." Emma protested being left with a babysitter on a school night, but I promised her we'd do something special this weekend, and she grudgingly accepted. Mrs. Chen arrived with her knitting and a concerned expression that told me she'd noticed the tension in my voice. "Be careful," she said quietly as I pulled on my coat. "Whatever this is, be careful." The drive to Manhattan felt longer than usual, traffic conspiring to give me too much time to worry. When I finally arrived at the Sapphire, the front entrance was closed, a sign indicating private event. But the door opened when I approached, one of Dominic's security team nodding me through without a word. The restaurant was empty, tables bare, no staff visible. Only Dominic stood in the main dining room, his back to me, hands in his pockets as he stared out the front windows at the Manhattan streets below. "Dominic?" My voice echoed in the empty space. "What's going on?" He turned and my breath caught. He looked exhausted, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled. His tie was loose, his hair looked like he'd been running his hands through it, and there was something in his eyes that I'd never seen before. Fear. "We have a problem," he said quietly. "A significant problem that affects you and Emma directly." My heart stopped. "Is she in danger? Did something happen?" "She's safe. For now." He moved toward me, his expression grim. "But there's a situation developing that you need to know about. Sit down, please." I sank into the nearest chair, my legs suddenly unable to support me. Dominic pulled out the chair across from me, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. 3 days ago, one of my associates was arrested, Vincent Calabresi. You've met him a few times. At my nod, he continued. Vincent has information about my operations, locations, transactions, names. Under normal circumstances, he'd stay quiet. That's the code. But Vincent has a daughter, 8 years old, leukemia. And the prosecutors are offering him a deal, testify against me, provide evidence for a RICO case, and his daughter gets moved to the top of the transplant list. The government has those kinds of connections. My stomach dropped. He's going to take the deal. He already did, yesterday. Which means I have maybe a week, 2 at most, before federal agents start making arrests. My lawyers are good, but with Vincent's testimony, they have enough to indict me and most of my senior people. He met my eyes directly. And when they start investigating me, they'll investigate everyone connected to me, including you. The room tilted. But I haven't done anything illegal. I just gave you information about patients who... I stopped, the reality crashing over me. I violated HIPAA multiple times. That's a federal crime. Yes. And the medical supplies I stole to treat Anthony. That's theft. Practicing medicine without proper licensing or supervision. My voice was rising, panic setting in. Oh God. They could take my nursing license. They could press criminal charges. Emma could end up in foster care. No. Dominic's voice was sharp, commanding. That's not going to happen. I won't let it. How are you going to stop federal prosecutors from doing their job? By making sure you're not implicated. He pulled out a folder. Of course there was a folder, and slid it across the table. Inside is documentation showing that you've been under duress, that I threatened you and your daughter, forced you to provide information against your will. There's also evidence that I've been monitoring your communications, tracking your movements, essentially holding you hostage through coercion and fear. I stared at him, not understanding. But none of that is true. It will be true if you say it is. His expression was carefully neutral. When the prosecutors come to you, and they will come to you, you tell them I forced your cooperation, that you were terrified for Emma's safety, that every action you took was under duress. They'll believe you because it's a believable story. A single mother, a vulnerable child, a powerful criminal exploiting your desperation. You're asking me to lie. I'm asking you to save yourself. His hands clenched on the table. Sophia, if you don't do this, you'll be charged as an accomplice. You'll lose your license, possibly go to prison. Emma will end up in the system. Everything I've done to protect you, everything you've sacrificed, it will all be for nothing. But what about you? If I testify that you coerced me, that makes the case against you stronger. I was going down anyway the moment Vincent decided to save his daughter. Something that might have been resignation crossed his face. At least this way, you and Emma come out of it intact. I couldn't process this. Couldn't reconcile the man sitting across from me, the one who'd spent 6 months cooking Sunday dinners and teaching Emma to appreciate art and making me feel seen, with the criminal who was now calmly instructing me to betray him to save myself. I can't do this, I whispered. Dominic, I can't lie about you. Not after everything. Yes, you can. He reached across the table and took my hand, his grip firm. And you will. Because Emma needs her mother. Because you've worked too hard to throw it all away for some misguided sense of loyalty to me. It's not misguided. The admission burst out before I could stop it. You're not just some criminal who forced my cooperation. You're the person who saved my daughter, who gave us a life we never could have had otherwise, who became— I couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't admit what he'd become to me. What? His voice had gone soft, dangerous in its gentleness. What did I become, Sophia? Someone I care about. Tears burned my eyes. Someone Emma loves. Someone who matters to me more than he should. Then you understand why you have to do this. His thumb traced circles on my palm. Because I care about you too. Both of you. And the only way I can protect you now is if you let me be the villain in this story. There has to be another way. There isn't. His expression was resolute. I've spent 3 days trying to find one. This is it. You testify against me. You claim duress. You walk away clean. And what happens to you? I'll probably spend the next 10 to 15 years in federal prison. He said it so calmly, like he was discussing the weather. My lawyers will minimize the damage where they can, but with Vincent's testimony and yours, there's no walking away from this. The thought of Dominic in prison, of Emma asking where he was and why he didn't come for Sunday dinners anymore, made something crack inside my chest. No, there has to be. Sophia. He squeezed my hand, forcing me to focus on him. Listen to me very carefully. In approximately 48 hours, federal agents are going to come to your apartment. They're going to ask you questions about your relationship with me, about information you provided, about medical treatment you gave to my associates. When they do, you tell them the truth about what you did, but you lie about why you did it. You say I threatened Emma, that I made you believe refusing me would put her in danger. But you never— It doesn't matter what actually happened. It matters what will keep you out of prison. His voice was harder now, the businessman making a deal rather than the man who'd become impossibly important to me. Emma needs you. That's all that matters. Not your feelings for me, not your sense of honor or loyalty. Emma. Focus on Emma. He was right. God, I hated it. But he was right. Emma had already lost one father figure. She couldn't lose her mother too. Not to prison, not to my own stupid loyalty to a man who'd known from the beginning that this arrangement would eventually cost him. Okay, I whispered. I'll do it. I'll testify that you coerced me. Relief flashed across his face, quickly buried. Good. My lawyer will contact you tomorrow to go over the details. Make sure you have your story straight. The more consistent you are, the more believable it will be. What do I tell Emma when she asks where you are? Tell her I had to go away for a while, that I'm handling some business problems. Don't tell her about the arrest until it happens. Let her have a few more days of normal. His voice cracked slightly on the last word. And Sophia? Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I wanted to keep coming to Sunday dinners. Tell her. He stopped, his jaw clenching. Tell her I'll miss her. The tears I'd been holding back finally spilled over. This isn't fair. You saved her. You saved both of us. This shouldn't be how it ends. Nothing about this life is fair. He stood, pulling me up with him. But at least Emma will be safe. That's what we both wanted from the beginning. That's what matters. He pulled me into his arms, holding me tight against his chest. I could feel his heart beating, solid and steady, and smell the cologne I'd come to associate with safety and Sunday mornings and laughter over pasta sauce. This was the last time I'd stand in his arms, the last time I'd feel protected by someone who'd become so much more than a business arrangement. Dominic, I whispered against his shoulder, I need you to know something. These past 6 months, they weren't just about the deal we made. You weren't just protecting us. You became family. Emma loves you. And I pulled back to look at his face, needing him to see the truth in my eyes. I love you. I know that's probably stupid and definitely inconvenient, but it's true. Something raw and painful crossed his expression. Sophia, you don't have to say it back. I just needed you to know, before everything changes. I touched his face, memorizing the feel of his skin, the angle of his jaw, the warmth in his dark eyes. Thank you. For everything. For saving Emma. For giving us a life worth living. For making me feel less alone. He kissed me then, hard and desperate, his hands tangling in my hair. It was nothing like the gentle, testing kisses in movies. This was grief and longing and goodbye all mixed together, the taste of tears, mine or his, I couldn't tell, salt between our lips. When we finally broke apart, I was shaking. He rested his forehead against mine, his breathing as uneven as my own. I love you too, he said quietly. I didn't mean to, didn't plan for it, but somewhere between Sunday dinners and Emma's art shows, you both became the family I thought I'd lost forever. His hands cupped my face gently. Which is why you have to do this. Why you have to walk away and let me be the villain. Promise me, Sophia. Promise me you'll protect yourself and Emma, no matter what. I promise. The words felt like a betrayal even as I said them. He kissed my forehead, my cheeks, my lips one more time. Then he stepped back, putting distance between us. You should go. The longer you're here, the more suspicious it looks when the investigation starts. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Picked up my bag with numb hands. Walked toward the door on legs that felt like they might give out at any moment. At the exit, I turned back. Dominic stood in the center of the empty restaurant, hands in his pockets, looking every inch the powerful crime boss he was. But his eyes held so much pain that it nearly drove me to my knees. I'll take care of Emma, I said. I'll make sure she knows you didn't abandon her, that you love her. Thank you. His voice was barely audible. Goodbye, Sophia. Goodbye, Dominic. I left the Sapphire for what I knew would be the last time. Cried in my car for 20 minutes before I could pull myself together enough to drive. Made it home somehow, though I didn't remember the journey. Mrs. Chen took one look at my face and simply squeezed my hand. After she left, I stood in Emma's doorway. Watching her sleep in her lavender room, surrounded by art supplies and security that had been bought with compromises I couldn't take back. Tomorrow I'd start preparing for the federal agents who would inevitably come. I'd practice the lies I needed to tell, the story about coercion and fear that would save me from the consequences of my choices. I'd figure out how to tell my daughter that the man she'd come to love wouldn't be coming to Sunday dinners anymore. But tonight, I let myself grieve for the life we'd almost had, for the man who'd saved us at tremendous cost to himself, for the future that had seemed possible just hours ago and now felt impossibly far away. My phone buzzed with one final text from Dominic. The apartment and Emma's school tuition are paid for the next 5 years. There's also a trust fund in her name that she can access when she turns 18. Take care of each other. And Sophia, thank you for giving me a family, even if it was just for a little while. I read the message 3 times, then deleted it as his lawyer had probably instructed. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. I went to bed but didn't sleep, just lay in the dark and counted down the hours until everything would change. The federal agents came on a Tuesday morning, exactly 48 hours after my last conversation with Dominic. 2 men in dark suits, polite but serious, flashing badges and asking if they could come inside to talk about my relationship with Dominic Russo. Emma was at school. I'd made sure of that, trading shifts with another nurse so I'd be home at exactly the time Dominic had predicted they'd arrive. He'd been right about everything else. I had to trust he was right about this too. I let them in, offered coffee they declined, and sat on the couch in the apartment Dominic had provided while they settled into chairs and pulled out recording devices. Ms. Torres, we understand you've been in contact with Dominic Russo for approximately 6 months. The older agent, who'd introduced himself as Special Agent Morrison, had kind eyes that reminded me uncomfortably of my father. Can you describe the nature of that relationship? This was it. The moment where I either saved myself and Emma, or went down with the man I'd stupidly fallen in love with. The choice should have been easy. Emma came first. Emma always came first. So why did the words stick in my throat? Ms. Torres? Agent Morrison leaned forward slightly. I know this is difficult, but we need to understand how Dominic Russo became involved in your life. Start at the beginning. How did you meet? I took a breath and began the story Dominic's lawyer had coached me on. About Emma and Mr. Derrick, about my desperation to protect my daughter when the system moved too slowly, about approaching Dominic for help I couldn't find elsewhere. And what did Mr. Russo ask for in return? The younger agent, Special Agent Chen, no relation to Mrs. Chen or Detective Chen, apparently it was just a common name, typed notes on a tablet as I spoke. Information about patients at Metropolitan Hospital. The admission felt like swallowing glass. He wanted to know when certain people were admitted, what their injuries were, which doctors were treating them. Did you provide this information willingly? This was the critical moment, the lie that would save me. No. He made it clear that if I didn't cooperate, Emma would be in danger. He never explicitly threatened her, but the implication was always there, that his protection was contingent on my continued cooperation. Agent Morrison's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes suggested he'd heard this story before. Did Mr. Russo ever physically threaten you or your daughter? No, he was always careful. He'd phrase things in ways that weren't direct threats but made his expectations clear. I was describing someone I didn't recognize, someone who didn't exist. The real Dominic had never threatened us, had never made us feel unsafe, had been nothing but gentle and kind and protective. But the real Dominic was going to prison anyway. I had to remember that. Vincent's testimony had sealed that fate. My lies were just ensuring I didn't go with him. The interview lasted 3 hours. They asked about specific dates, specific requests for information, the medical treatment I'd provided to Anthony. I answered every question as Dominic's lawyer had instructed, weaving a story of coercion and fear that felt like acid on my tongue. When they finally left, Agent Morrison handed me his card. We'll likely need to speak with you again as the investigation progresses. You may be called to testify before a grand jury. He paused at the door. Ms. Torres, I want you to know that we understand how men like Dominic Russo operate, how they use people's desperation against them. You're not the first person he's manipulated, and you won't be the last. What you're doing, cooperating with our investigation, that takes courage. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Let them think I was a victim. Let them think Dominic had manipulated and coerced me. It was easier than explaining the truth, that I'd walked into his world willingly, that I'd made conscious choices every step of the way, that I'd fallen in love with him despite knowing exactly who and what he was. After they left, I sat alone in the apartment and felt the weight of my betrayal settle over me like a shroud. Dominic had asked me to do this. Had insisted, actually. But that didn't make it feel less like I'd stabbed him in the back. My phone rang. Mrs. Chen. Did they come? Yes. And you told them what they needed to hear? Yes. A long pause. How do you feel? Like I just sold my soul. The words came out flat, emotionless. Like I betrayed the person who saved my daughter's life. You did what you had to do to protect Emma. That's not betrayal. That's survival. But Mrs. Chen's voice held doubt, like she wasn't entirely sure of her own words. Dominic's going to prison because of me. Dominic's going to prison because of choices he made long before he met you. She was firm now. He knew the risks. He accepted them. What he did for Emma, making sure you're not caught up in his downfall, that's his choice too. You need to respect that choice. She was right. Intellectually, I knew she was right. But my heart felt like it had been hollowed out with a knife. I picked Emma up from school that afternoon, and she chattered happily about her day, about the new boy in class who'd complimented her drawing, about the science experiment they were doing next week. Normal second-grader concerns, innocent and simple and exactly what she deserved. Is Dominic coming for dinner on Sunday? She asked as we walked home, her small hand in mine. This was it, the conversation I'd been dreading. No, sweetheart, he can't make it this week. Oh, disappointment colored her voice. What about next week? I don't think he'll be able to come for a while, baby. He's dealing with some complicated business, problems that are going to take a long time to solve. Emma was quiet for a moment, processing. Is he in trouble? How did she know? How did 7-year-olds always seem to sense the things adults tried to hide? Yes, he's in some trouble, but it's not anything you need to worry about, okay? He just won't be able to visit for a while. But we'll see him again eventually, right? She looked up at me with those two old eyes. When his problems are fixed? I didn't know how to answer that. Didn't know how to explain that Dominic's problems would take years to fix, that by the time he was released from prison, Emma would be grown, that the man who'd taught her to appreciate art and make perfect pasta sauce would miss her entire childhood. I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so. That Sunday, I cooked dinner alone for the first time in months. Pasta with marinara sauce, trying to follow the method Dominic had taught me. But the sauce was too watery, the pasta overcooked, and sitting at the table with just Emma and two empty places felt like grieving someone who wasn't dead, but might as well have been. Emma pushed her food around her plate, uncharacteristically quiet. Finally, she said, I miss him, Mama. I know, baby. I miss him too. Do you think he misses us? I know he does. That much at least was true. Very much. That night, after Emma was asleep, I pulled out my phone and typed a message to the number I knew was probably disconnected. Emma asked about you today. I told her you're dealing with business problems. I don't know how to explain that you won't be at Sunday dinners anymore. I don't know how to explain any of this to her, to myself. I hit send, even though I knew it wouldn't go through. The message sat there with a red exclamation point, undeliverable, just like everything else I wanted to say to him. The arrest happened 3 days later. I saw it on the news, Footage of Dominic being led out of the Sapphire in handcuffs, federal agents swarming his restaurants and properties. The anchor described him as a major organized crime figure, rattling off charges that included racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder. They showed his mugshot. Even in that unflattering photo, with harsh lighting and a neutral expression, he looked like himself, strong, controlled, unafraid. I turned off the TV before Emma could see it. The grand jury testimony came 2 weeks later. I sat in a federal courthouse, raised my right hand, and swore to tell the truth. Then I proceeded to lie under oath, describing a relationship built on fear and coercion that bore no resemblance to reality. The prosecutors were pleased with my testimony, said it strengthened their case significantly, thanked me for my bravery in coming forward. I felt like I was going to vomit the entire train ride home. Life continued in that strange, hollow way it does after losing something important. Emma started third grade. I continued my nurse practitioner program. We had Sunday dinners, just the two of us, and pretended the empty chair at the table was normal. Emma stopped asking about Dominic after the first month, stopped drawing pictures for him, stopped mentioning things she wanted to tell him. It was like she'd locked that part of her life away in a box she refused to open. I understood the impulse. I'd done the same thing. 2 months after the arrest, I received a letter. It had been forwarded through Dominic's lawyer, with instructions not to open it until I was alone. I waited until Emma was asleep, then sat at the kitchen table and carefully unsealed the envelope. The handwriting was neat, precise, exactly what I would have expected from him. Sophia, if you're reading this, the trial is over and I've been convicted. I don't know what my sentence will be, but I can guess. Probably 15 to 20 years, with possibility of parole after 10 if I'm lucky and my lawyers are good. I need you to understand something. Everything that happened, from the moment you walked into the Sapphire to the moment you testified against me, was my choice. You didn't trap me. You didn't destroy me. I saw a woman desperately trying to protect her child, and I chose to help her. Everything that followed was a natural consequence of that choice. You gave me 6 months of something I thought I'd lost forever. A family. A reason to come home. A sense that I was more than just the organization I ran. Emma gave me the chance to be someone good, someone protective, someone who could make a child laugh instead of flinch. You gave me hope that maybe I wasn't as lost as I thought. I don't regret any of it. Not one Sunday dinner, not one art supply purchase, not one moment spent teaching Emma to appreciate the things I loved. And I certainly don't regret making sure you and she came out of this intact. Take care of each other. Let Emma pursue her art. Get your nurse practitioner certification and become the incredible healthcare provider I know you can be. Live the life you deserve, the one you worked so hard to build. And Sophia? Don't feel guilty about this. I'm where I belong. Men like me don't get happy endings in nice apartments with Sunday dinners and 7-year-olds who trust us. We get prison cells and legal fees and decades to think about our choices. That's the deal. I understood it going in. I love you both. That's the one thing in all of this that was pure and uncomplicated. Remember that, when you think about me. Remember that you were loved. D. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face, before carefully folding it and putting it back in the envelope. He'd been convicted, sentenced, was probably already in federal prison somewhere, beginning a term that would span most of Emma's childhood. And he didn't blame me, didn't resent my testimony, had written to absolve me of the guilt that was eating me alive from the inside out. But absolution from him didn't change the facts. I'd stood in front of a grand jury and lied about a man who'd saved my daughter, who'd given us a life we couldn't have afforded otherwise, who'd loved us despite every reason not to. I'd betrayed him to save myself. That was the truth I'd have to live with for the rest of my life. 3 years had passed since Dominic's conviction. 3 years of Emma growing from a frightened 7-year-old into a confident 10-year-old who'd found her voice through art therapy and the security of knowing she was safe. 3 years of me completing my nurse practitioner certification and accepting a position at a family health clinic in Brooklyn. 3 years of building a life that looked normal from the outside but felt hollow in ways I couldn't quite articulate. The apartment Dominic had arranged for us was still ours. The rent somehow still being paid through some mechanism his lawyers had set up before the conviction. Emma's school tuition continued to appear without explanation. The trust fund he'd mentioned sat in an account I couldn't access, waiting for Emma's 18th birthday. His fingerprints were still all over our lives, even with him locked away in a federal correctional facility in Pennsylvania. I'd driven up to visit him once, 8 months after his conviction. The lawyer had arranged it, said Dominic wanted to see me if I was willing. I'd made the 2-hour drive on a Tuesday, my only day off that week, and sat in a sterile visiting room across from the man I'd betrayed. He'd looked older, thinner, the expensive suits replaced by prison khakis, the confidence dimmed but not extinguished. But when he'd seen me, his face had transformed, warmth flooding his expression. Sophia. My name on his lips had sounded like a prayer. You came. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me. After everything. I'll always want to see you. He'd reached across the table, and I'd taken his hand, feeling the calluses that hadn't been there before. Prison work, probably. How's Emma? We'd talked for 2 hours about everything except the trial, the testimony, the lies I'd told to save myself. About Emma's artwork, about my new job, about Mrs. Chen who'd broken her hip but was recovering, about books we'd read and movies we'd missed, and all the mundane details of a life he was no longer part of. When visiting hours ended, he'd held my hand a moment longer. Don't come back, he'd said quietly. This isn't a place for you. You've moved forward. Keep moving. Don't let me be an anchor. I'd left and never returned, honoring his request even though it felt like cutting off a limb. But I'd written him letters, hundreds of them over the years, updating him on Emma's progress, sharing my own achievements, telling him about the life he'd made possible, even if he couldn't be part of it. And he'd written back. Not every time, but often enough that I'd come to treasure his neat handwriting, his observations about books, his careful questions about Emma, that showed he remembered every detail I'd shared. It was a strange kind of relationship, an impossible one, but it was what we had. Now, on an unseasonably warm October afternoon, I sat in my clinic office between patients and opened an envelope that had arrived that morning. Dominic's parole hearing was in 6 weeks. His lawyer thought he had a good chance, model prisoner, completed multiple educational programs, no disciplinary infractions. If approved, he could be released after 7 years instead of 15. 7 years. Emma would be 14 by then, nearly grown. Would she even remember the man who'd taught her to appreciate art and cook perfect marinara sauce? Would she want to see him, or would I have to explain why the person she'd loved at 7 wanted nothing to do with her at 14? Would I? The question paralyzed me, because the truth was, I didn't know. 3 years of building a life without Dominic had created a stability I was terrified to disturb. Emma was thriving. I had a career I loved. We were happy, or at least content. What would it mean to let him back into our lives? And what would it mean to keep him out? That night, after dinner, I made a decision. Emma, I need to talk to you about something important. She looked up from her homework, immediately alert to the serious tone in my voice. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong, but I need to tell you something about Dominic, about where he's been for the past 3 years. I'd been putting this conversation off for years, telling myself she was too young to understand, that it was better to let her forget. But she deserved the truth, and if Dominic was going to be paroled, she needed to be prepared. I know where he is, Mama. Emma's voice was quiet, matter of fact. He's in prison. I stared at her. How did you know that? I heard you talking to Mrs. Chen about it a long time ago, and I looked him up online last year. She met my eyes directly, and I saw traces of the woman she'd become in her 10-year-old face. I know what he did, what he was, what he did for us. Emma, I know you testified against him too. I read articles about the trial. Her voice held no judgment, just careful observation. You said he threatened us, that he forced you to help him. But that's not true, is it? The question hung between us. I could lie again. Could maintain the fiction I'd built for the prosecutors and the grand jury and everyone else. Or I could finally tell my daughter the truth. No, I said quietly. That's not true. Dominic never threatened us. He helped us when no one else would. And I testified against him to protect us from legal consequences. He asked me to. Insisted, actually. Because he loved us. Yes. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing. Do you still love him? The question shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. Yes. I don't think I ever stopped. Then why didn't you visit him? Why didn't we? Because he asked me not to, said prison wasn't a place for us, that we should move forward with our lives. I moved to sit beside her. But Emma, there's something you should know. Dominic's parole hearing is in 6 weeks. If it's approved, he could be released soon, and I need to know how you feel about that. She chewed her bottom lip, thinking. I miss him, she admitted finally. I know I was only 7 when he left, but I remember him. How safe I felt when he was around. How he made you smile. I missed that for a long time. And now? Now I'm scared. She looked at me with vulnerable honesty. What if he comes back and it's weird? What if he doesn't want to see us anymore? What if everything's different and we can't get back what we had? I pulled her into a hug. Those are all valid fears, baby. I'm scared too. But you want him to come back. I do. The admission felt like exhaling after holding my breath for years. But only if you're okay with it. Only if it doesn't hurt you or make you uncomfortable. You come first. You always come first. Emma pulled back, studying my face. I think we should see him. When he gets out, I mean. Not because we have to, but because we want to. Because he was family once, and maybe he could be again. Okay? I kissed her forehead. Okay, we'll see him. Together. That night, I wrote Dominic a letter I'd been composing in my head for 3 years. Dominic, I heard about your parole hearing. I hope it goes well. I hope you get your chance at freedom, at building a life beyond the one you left behind. But I also need you to know something. When you get out, if you get out, we want to see you. Emma and I. Not out of obligation or guilt, but because you still matter to us. Because these past 3 years have proven that your absence leaves a hole nothing else can fill. I know what you said during my last visit, that we should move forward, not look back, and we have moved forward. Emma is thriving. I'm building a career. We're happy. But we could be happier with you in our lives. If you want that. If prison hasn't changed you so much that you don't want the complications of a ready-made family who comes with baggage and legal history and betrayals I still haven't forgiven myself for. Emma knows the truth now. About what you did for us, about the testimony, about everything, and she wants to see you anyway. Maybe that's foolish, maybe it's dangerous, but it's what we both want. So when you walk out of those gates, if you walk out of those gates, know that you have a place to come home to, if you want it. We love you, we've always loved you, and we're willing to fight for what we had if you are. Yours, Sophia. I sealed the letter and mailed it before I could second-guess myself. 6 weeks later, I got the call. Dominic's parole had been approved. He'd be released in 10 days, and Emma and I would be there waiting. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.